It's late, you're tired. The kind of tired where all you want is to sit down and not think about anything for a while. But you walk past the sink, and there they are. A couple of plates, a pan, maybe a glass or two. And something in you, without much deliberation, without a big internal debate, just starts washing them. Because leaving them there isn't really an option you're considering. Most people would call that a good habit. And maybe it is. But if you're someone who genuinely cannot leave dishes in the sink overnight, you probably know it's not quite that simple. It's not really about the dishes. It's about something else entirely, something that's harder to name but very easy to feel. People who live with you might find it puzzling, or impressive, or occasionally exhausting if they don't share the same relationship with a clean sink. But if anyone has ever called you particular, or rigid, or just quietly wondered why it matters so much to you, it might be worth understanding what's actually going on. Because the answer probably says more about how your mind works than it does about how much you care about clean dishes. Let's start with something you might recognize. A dirty dish sitting in the sink isn't just a dirty dish, it's an unfinished thing. And unfinished things have a way of staying present even when you're not looking at them. You can walk into another room, sit down, try to relax, and there's still a low hum in the background. A small, persistent awareness that something isn't resolved yet, the sink isn't clean, the kitchen isn't done, the day isn't actually finished. Cognitive psychologists have studied this phenomenon for decades. The brain tends to keep incomplete tasks active in working memory, running quietly in the background, pulling small amounts of attention, even when you're focused on something else. It's not dramatic. Most of the time, you barely notice it consciously, but it's there. And for some people, that background hum is louder than it is for others. Finishing the dishes isn't just about the kitchen. It's about closing that loop, quieting that hum, giving your brain permission to actually stop working for the night. Because everything that needed to be handled has been handled. That's not a small thing. That's the difference between an evening where you genuinely rest and one where you sort of rest, but not completely. There's also something worth understanding about what a clean kitchen does to a morning. You wake up, you walk in, and the space is ready. Nothing left over from yesterday. No reminder of what you didn't finish. Just a clean surface and a day that hasn't started yet. That might sound minor, but the way a morning begins has a way of setting a tone that carries further than most people expect. Research on environmental psychology suggests that physical spaces have a measurable effect on mood and cognitive function. Cluttered or unresolved environments, even small ones, even just a sink full of dishes, can elevate stress hormones and make it harder to fully shift into a resting state. People who keep their spaces orderly aren't imagining the calm that comes with it. There's something real happening, and maybe you've always felt that, even without anyone explaining the science. The clean kitchen feels different from the dirty one. Not just visually, the whole room feels different. And by extension, so do you. Here's something that doesn't get talked about enough. The decision to wash the dishes when you're tired is actually a decision about your future self. The version of you who wakes up tomorrow morning. You're doing something uncomfortable now, so that person has one less thing to deal with. That's a specific kind of thinking, and not everyone has it naturally. It requires the ability to feel the discomfort of leaving something undone more than the discomfort of doing it when you're tired. For a lot of people, those two things are reversed. The effort of doing it now wins, and the dishes sit there. For you, the weight of leaving it unfinished is heavier than the effort of just taking care of it. That's not perfectionism. That's a very particular relationship with follow-through. Maybe this showed up early for you. Maybe there was a point, and you might not even be able to trace it exactly, where you noticed what a finished thing felt like versus an unfinished one. Where you learned, in whatever way you learned it, that small things left undone have a way of accumulating into something heavier than any single dish ever deserved to be. Or maybe it wasn't a moment at all. Maybe it was just the slow development of a standard, a baseline for what done actually means. Not done enough. Not mostly done. Done. This connects to something broader, about how certain people move through daily life. The dishes are almost never just about the dishes. They're part of a larger pattern, a way of treating small things with the same seriousness as big ones. Because small things left unattended have a way of becoming the texture of a life. The background noise, the low-grade friction that never quite goes away. People who never leave dishes in the sink tend to apply the same logic to a lot of other things. Clothes off the floor, surfaces cleared, the small loop closed before moving to the next thing. It's not about cleanliness exactly. It's about a kind of order that makes everything else feel more manageable. A foundation that holds even when other things don't. Studies on self-regulation suggest that small acts of follow-through, completing minor tasks, maintaining routines, keeping environments ordered, build a kind of behavioral momentum. People who do the small things consistently tend to find it easier to do the harder things too. Not because the tasks are connected, but because the habit of finishing what you start carries across everything. That's not a trivial thing to have developed. And most people who have it don't fully realize how much it's working in the background. But there's a shadow side, worth acknowledging, not to criticize, just to see it clearly. Sometimes the standard is hard to share. If you live with someone who doesn't feel the same way about the sink, a partner, a family member, a roommate, the gap can create friction that neither person fully intended. You're not trying to impose a standard. You just can't quite understand how the other person doesn't feel what you feel when the dishes are sitting there. And sometimes the inability to leave things undone follows you into moments when rest would actually serve you better. The dishes get done, but the cost is 20 minutes of energy you didn't really have. The loop gets closed, but you're the one who paid for it. Every time, regardless of whether anyone else notices or cares. Knowing when to apply the standard fully, and when to let something sit until morning. Just occasionally, just when it genuinely doesn't matter. That's its own kind of awareness, not a reason to change the habit. Just a reason to hold it with a little flexibility when the situation calls for it. What people who never leave dishes in the sink understand, even if they've never put it this way, is that small things are not actually small. The way you handle the minor stuff is a reflection of something real about how you operate. And a life with fewer unfinished edges tends to feel different from one where things accumulate quietly in the background. In a world that increasingly treats good enough as a reasonable standard for everything, there's something worth noticing about a person who closes the loop on the small things. Not because anyone is watching, not because they'll get credit for it, but because leaving it undone just doesn't sit right with them. That's not rigidity, that's integrity applied to the ordinary. Are you someone who can't leave dishes in the sink, or can you walk past them without a second thought? And do you think it actually matters? Or is it one of those things that says more about a person than the dishes themselves ever could? Let me know. To get more psychology content like this in your feed, please subscribe, hit the like button, and share your experiences with us. You'll be supporting our efforts too. Thanks for watching.